I can't believe we just finished season 1 of the Misfit Founders podcast. It feels like yesterday I was starting this thing, and here we are, almost 40 conversations later, amazing podcast guests, and a lot of value that I think we brought to the aspiring new founders community. Now, this is not the end of it, it's the end of season 1. We're starting season 2 in September, so be on the lookout for new episodes coming soon. Meanwhile, I'll leave you with this video. I wanted to do a compilation of all of the episodes that we had, but not just a random compilation. We're talking about our guests, our founder guests' best favorite books that they mention at the end of the podcast. So, if you didn't watch until the end of the podcast, this is your opportunity to learn a bit about the books that inspired them. And we'll start off with myself. This is my favorite book right here, Lost and Founder by Rand Fishkin. He is the founder, the CEO and founder of Moz Analytics. You've probably heard of it. It's been super famous platform. The reason why I like this book, I have another book that's amongst top for me that I talk all the time about, which is Good to Great. I love that book as well. But the reason why this is my favorite book is because it's actually the first book that I ever read that tells a story. So Rand in this book talks about his journey to starting Moz, his challenges before that, the challenges of starting and growing a business like Moz, and everything in between, getting VC, and all in kind of like this narrated storytelling approach, which, to be honest, I prefer most of the times, and I learned that that's the way I like to consume content, is through stories. Yeah, so that's my favorite book. Now I'm gonna play a compilation with all of the founders that we talked with over the podcast, and you let us know as well, what is your favorite book or the top business book that inspired your journey into entrepreneurship. And I'll see you in autumn for season 2.
Called The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. So producer to the musical stars of the world, and they call him the guru in California. Has produced and supported artists like Adele, like you name it, he's worked with them. And he's created, I read it almost like a manifesto on the act of creating, which is what Misfit founders and entrepreneurs are doing. We're creating, it's not music, it's not artwork, it's companies that deliver value in a particular way to solve a problem. The truths, as I call them, in that book are just awesome. It's one of those books that I couldn't put down. I was interested by what I'd read about this creative genius himself, and his own practices. And I picked it up, and I just literally, I think it was 3 days, and I was like, go for it. It was done.
The business book that changed my perspective on things was, it's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And that one's a contrarian view of running a startup, because there's all these rule books, as I said, and that book's like, there are no rules. Here's some realistic examples of what happened, or like how to have this tough conversation and stuff like that. It's an amazing book.
I think I would choose Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits.
Yeah, but it's by James Clear, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's in a few words. It's about how you can grow by setting small habits that you do constantly, and then you can associate them with something pleasant. But on a personal note, how I would describe it is, since I'm a numbers guy and I like investing and so on, I think compound interest does not only apply to financial stuff; it will also apply to your own growth and to healthy stuff and so on. And okay, if you do a small exercise today and a small exercise tomorrow, and on the long run, this actually adds up a lot.
Crossing the Chasm, I think, new to tech. It was just the fundamental book that I've read 4th time now. I think too often people try and read 100 books, but Priestley said he's scared of the man that's trained one punch 100,000 times rather than someone that's trained 10,000 punches once. So I think people need to nail the fundamentals and crossing the chasm. It's really important at that. Just talking about targeting your marketing, finding a niche, listening to your customers, and making something good enough that word of mouth makes you go viral. I think if people nail those in any industry with any product, they probably can't fail.
So the first book that came to my mind is Manifest by Roxie Nafousi. It's a 7-step guide to meditation. It's something that I never thought of in the past. I was like, manifest. I was like, oh, it's those people who put like, those like dream boards like with pictures from their magazines. Like, oh, it's that crap. So I was like, all right, it looks pretty. I'll open it and see what they say. And I was like reading through like the first chapters and like being so skeptical, so suspicious. Like it's just some, it's crap. Like I don't understand all this. And then eventually I got to understand it. And this book actually was the beginning of my spiritual growth, because as an Eastern European kid, they teach you that you need to take care of your body. As a woman, you need to take care of your looks, and you need to take care of your mind and your brain. But no one talks about the feelings and your soul, that you actually need to develop this connection between you and the real you. And this book was about, this book gave me the opportunity to start developing myself on the spiritual level. And this has been the biggest transformation for me. And this transformation changed how I behave in relationships with my family, with my partner, with my friends, as a business person, as a leader. It just affected so many areas of my life. And I started actually growing and developing a lot quicker when I started building this connection with my inner self.
So right now I am about halfway through Atlas of the Heart. And like I said, I love people and I love to understand where they're coming from. So whenever people are talking to me, I can always kind of see like a background behind it. If someone comes off hurt or just a little bit abrasive, I always can think like, okay, there's something bigger going on there. So I love Atlas of the Heart because it kind of just dives into the places that we go when we're feeling hurt or when we're feeling happy. And so it kind of just explains that social interaction. So I really like that book a lot.
Nassim Taleb, Black Swan. Although I found it kind of difficult to read.
Okay.
But the idea of how luck and the Black Swan's impact, like that opens your eyes. It's like, okay, it's not everything that I had to be prepared and I had to be really good and do everything right. Is that can be situations that are going to change everything. So be protected for those. But he's got several books that talk about luck and the black swans and yeah, that kind of, okay, maybe I'm not 100% sure of this that I'm going to do in my business. Maybe something wrong can happen and I have to be prepared.
There's a book called Principles by Ray Dalio, and he essentially, I guess, sum him up as an investor, very successful man in the world of investment and finance. But he put together a whole book. Half of it's about his life story, but the other half is sort of broken down into his personal and work life principles that he's built over his whole life and career. And I've taken a hell of a lot of value from that. A lot of profound wisdom about your outlook on life, how to deal with other people, difficult scenarios, how to build a company of people that might be from very diverse backgrounds, but get them to pull together as a team. Principles has been a phenomenally good and valuable resource for me.
Kathy Glass, she writes a lot of books about her experiences as a foster carer.
Okay.
And they're not entirely, I suppose, relevant to what I do, but I've read them since I was a teenager. And it's hearing stories of children and adults and their experiences and how that shapes who they are. So, okay, for example, there's one book where a girl was abused by her father, and wider family network, and she's grown up in foster care, and she's done a really good job of navigating that, and she's gone on to lead like a perfectly normal, relatively happy life. And I think I must have read like 20 of her books by now, and it's just helped me realize that actually there are a lot of people in life that are struggling with a lot of different things, and A, they can be overcome, but B, just give people some bloody grace in life.
But the Startup Owner's Manual, Steve Blank,
Yeah.
it's literally like a workbook of like, he calls it getting out of the building. I think founders now need to read that book. Because again, so many people want to try to skip the stages of growth and they want to like find shortcuts, but there aren't any shortcuts. And that book is going to help you think through the reasons why there's no shortcuts and give you a blueprint for working through them.
I remember reading Abundance by Diamandis and Kotler, which is a real interesting book. It's a techno-optimist's book. Basically is making the case that the media feeds us a very negative news cycle, and actually, on the whole, life is getting better, and the emerging technologies we're seeing mean that we've got the opportunity to continue that curve, rather than everything being a negative news story and a negative outlook. And it makes a whole bunch of interesting cases around AI. This was written probably 10 years ago. And I remember reading that, but its techno-optimism was something that really resonated with me.
It was called Key Person of Influence by Daniel Priestley. And that book, it kind of like cued in about like 3 or 4 years before I even like was known around like a particular topic. I was studying that. And that was the first book where I was like, oh yeah, this is just like, that's kind of how it works. And so it got the wheels churning. So that I think by the time when there was that opportunity, I was like, I already know the next right thing. So yeah, that was a really great book.
I remember when I read The Lean Startup, and it did change my perspective into business building. I didn't go to business school, but I came with very old school business concepts. I think Lean Startup, I have a lot of, I wouldn't say it is even my favorite book. It is just a book that changed my perspective of things. Yeah.
Brad Gilbert, Winning Ugly. It's a tennis book. So Brad Gilbert was a pro player. Now he's a coach. Most lately he's a coach to Coco Gauff, who just won the U.S. Open. And his whole thing is about, like, I know winning ugly sounds bad, but it means like make the fucking most out of yourself and every opportunity that you have. And a lot, like, I would rather win ugly than lose beautifully every day. And it's about just like exploiting every opportunity that you have and taking, this whole thing about, a tennis match starts before you're on the court. Like, what do you do the night before, the day before, the morning before, and how you can be a much worse player, but optimize your own performance and psychology to the highest. So, yeah.
Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. It is a masterpiece of a book. It is massive. It is an absolute slog to get through. There are hard parts, right? But like, it is an amazing, amazing, amazing book. And I think that it has enough characters that everyone should kind of see themselves reflected in it in some way.
It's called Rework. It's from the folks behind Basecamp. There's been some stuff in the news over the last few years about Basecamp, not necessarily a firm I want to align too closely with, but that particular book is a great deep dive on thought patterns and instincts if you're trying to start something new. How to do discovery, how to keep fresh eyes, how to keep motivating. It's a great book. I tend to reread it about every 18 months or so. It's a great refresher on really good habits.
How to Start a Podcast by Kristen Meinzer. And the reason this impacted me is, one, when I read this book, I decided that, okay, I could start a podcast. That honestly was the book I read that made me go, oh, okay, this could start a podcast. But also it planted the seed for my own book, because I'd always wanted to write a book, but I just worried about, I've got all this content and how will I put it all in a book? Because I felt like the subject, my book is about how to create a product, and I felt it was so big and things change so much, and how could I write a book about it? And then I read this book about starting a podcast, and I noticed how smart she was, that it gave you enough detail to help you, but not so much detail that something would be obsolete in a year. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
There was nothing really in there that could date, no recommendations of
Quite
microphones
evergreen
or text.
type of
Yeah.
feedback.
And I was like, this is really smart. And I think reading that book, like I said, was the catalyst for me to think I could start a podcast. But that's where the seed for the book came from, because one of my objections to writing the book, because I'd thought about it for a long time, was just that. There's too much and things change too much. And then I was like, okay, this proves to me that you can write a book that's really useful without giving every tiny little thing.
Book of Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Very Effective People. That's one of my favorite ones.
It's actually over there. Solve for Happy by Mo Gawdat was really powerful for me when I was trying to work out what brought me joy post.
You bought this?
We had Mo come in and talk at Paddle actually, and then everyone got the book. So
interesting.
The forward is the best bit. I'm not gonna lie, sorry Mo, but like if you only have a short amount of time, read the forward, and it really helped me work out what brought me joy and how I should be spending my time.
I read Robert Caro's biography of Bob Moses, which I would really recommend if you want to learn about a builder on a grand scale. It's like probably the most interesting biography I've ever read.
The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Yeah.
I just love that book because it was the exact opposite of that idea of me reading a book that's by somebody who's never built something. And it was just such an honest kind of account of like how many things can possibly go wrong, but us still like survive it and kind of push through it. And I love that book.
Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins was absolutely brilliant for me, because about 3/4 of the way through, I realized how he was teaching what he was teaching. And that to me was a revelation. You say this and you say that and you say that, and then you will believe that. And you go, oh, that's so clever. I'll go back. You said that, I agree with that. You said that, I agree with that. You said that, I agree. And this, I didn't think I was, but maybe I am, because the other things I can confirm. So, and I just thought the whole thing there. I think he also might talk about asking good questions. I think, or maybe it would be better. Maybe it was like ask better questions or something like that. But yeah, that massively changed my life.
It's Mikaela Loach, and it's called It's Not That Radical. It's about climate injustice, and it's fantastic. And again, like we spoke about, why language is really important. In the first couple of pages on her book, she said that she's referring to ethnic minorities to the global majority. And I was like, this is amazing. It just reframes everything you thought about ethnic minorities.
There's a book, Small Island, by, have you heard of it?
Yeah, I think so.
It's
I've
about
not read it.
Yeah, it's about the Jamaicans coming to Britain, like from the war onwards. It's a beautiful book, but yeah, really interesting about the Jamaicans fighting in the war, and then kind of experiencing racism and stuff when they tried to settle then in the UK. But yeah, that's always stuck in my mind, that book.
Win Without Pitching Manifesto. It's quite a famous book in the creative industry, and it's written by a guy called Blair Enns. He coaches creative entrepreneurs, and basically this book was written at a time where the common practice for creative agencies was to write pitches to win work, right? So any given company would post out a job that they wanted done, and several companies would gather and like work on pitch for weeks, and it would cost them loads of money, and they would put loads of free ideas in the pitch. So everyone loses that. And this guy, Blair Enns, he wrote that manifesto, which says a lot of things, but one really important thing is that he says it's written as in we will not XYZ, and it's the whole book is written like that. It's like a book written for creatives as part of like a group, us, the creatives in the industry. We will stop doing that so that our industry will like change and get better.
The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. It's a very good book on pretty much, I mean, it's not stoic, but it's about making like, I guess, pain, whether it's psychological, physical, whatever, but like uncomfortable experiences, they're part of the human nature, but it's how we deal with them that really makes a difference. If we start to struggle with them, if we were like, oh, I don't want to feel pain, that in itself creates a problem, right? Rather than accepting things for what they are and moving on and going towards what you really value in life.
From Max Berry. It's a novel. It's called Company. And he worked 20 years for Hewlett-Packard and wrote a very humoristic, sarcastic book about companies as organizations and how people interact in these organizations. It's an amazing book. It pictures a lot of things which happens in reality with a very sarcastic, humoristic edition in it. And yeah, when you ever worked in big companies and you always think, oh, I'm the only person who had this experience and so on, read this book. It's amazing.
The Art of War, Sun Tzu. It's just a phenomenal piece of strategic thinking. I mean, it's around, as it says, the art of war, but I think it's something that you can play into life and business in so many ways. You know, going into battles that you know you can't win, don't do it. Simple things like that.
Principles. Ray Dalio. Codifying the operating system you run by has been not only super impactful for me personally, but also for companies that we work with, right? We spoke about Shopify earlier, and at Shopify, we had an operating system for our organization, which is basically a codification of your principles. And just having that clarity is a massive game changer. We're talking about leading large organizations. Clarity is an antidote to slowing your organization down, and codifying your principles is a way to bring clarity.
My favorite book as it pertains to building startups, which I recommend more than anything, is called 4 Steps to the Epiphany by Steve Blank.
Okay.
Check it out.
The Third Door by Alex Benayan. And it is about most people, so let's say life is a club or a bar, let's just say a club. And most people either go in through general admission and they pay a ticket to get in. The other type of people, the elite people, pay VIP to get bottle service. And the third door is you sneak through the kitchen, put on a tuxedo to look like you're, a bottle person, and you sneak in through the back. And I think in life, everyone thinks there's 1 or 2 ways to do things, but there's always a third way if you can get strategic on how to go about being creative and getting opportunities.
The original positioning book, Positioning the Battle for Your Mind by Ries and Trout, is such a good book. I read it like 100 times. And I dump on that book a little bit because it frustrated me that it didn't teach me how to do positioning, but it was the original book on positioning, and it was more about the idea of positioning. What is it? Why do we care? That kind of thing. But that book had a big impact on me